And thinking about the assassination of Charlie Kirk and just saddened by it because of just everything about it, especially his family. But I think I do have a little bit of maybe a different perspective because I have been attacked by both the left and the extreme left and the right. Um, and it's always been interesting to me how the right despises me almost as much as the left, and the polarity there. But it has put me in a position, I guess, where I can understand some things, and the we'll see eventually. Hopefully, we'll find out who killed Charlie Kirk, what the motive was. Um, but I would bet it was the extreme left. Um, Pretty sure of that, and I'll bet it was motivated by, of course, by fear and by hate, because Charlie Kirk spoke a lot of truth, and he was basically labeled by the left, and this is even, your elected representatives, congressmen, senators, labeled Charlie Kirk basically as like a Nazi. Um, and, they view this as preservation, uh, meaning to get rid of the narrative of something that is going to affect them very negatively in the future. They look at as Charlie Kirk as like the up and coming speakers of Hitler's days against the Jews. Now, of course, they don't place themselves as the Jews, but they place themselves as these individuals as they that are being um, politically, I guess, attacked. And if they don't stop it, that it'll continue on as it did in the 1930s and early 40s in Germany and in Europe. And so they justify these murders by saying that we're preventing another Holocaust, um, or another, regime like the Hitler's regime. Now, the problem with that is I don't think that's what Charlie Kirk in any way was teaching and basically preaching. Um, and that's where it comes down to, is basically the ideology. Charlie Kirk, was teaching what he believed was truth from God. He was teaching that things like transgender and homosexuality and those things were not just wrong, but they were very destructive to the nation. They were very dangerous to people. They were dangerous to our young people. And he was articulating in such a way that many, many people were convinced by his words. And these, individuals who prescribed to this transgender homosexual ideology um, had to stop him because, but the propaganda is that he's speaking hate, and that eventually it'll progress to the point where this will be another Holocaust against the transgender and community. And so therefore we have to kill him now, and we have to kill and use violence now in order to preserve ourselves for the future. Which it's a coward's basically action. That man who was on the roof and who shot Charlie Kirk, at least that's what appears, is that it was on the roof, and definitely someone shot him. But they were cowards. They didn't want to come up to Charlie Kirk and argue, debate their viewpoint, their ideology. They were cowards. They just get behind the scope of the gun, pull the trigger because They didn't want to face Charlie Kirk and actually in public try to defend their ideology, which is hard to defend because when you boil it all down, it's very, very hard to get anybody to believe and convinced that the transgender homosexual ideology doctrine is correct. And so they were cowards. They just wanted to kill the person who was, very effective at communicating with especially the young community about the danger and the really pain and sorrow that the transgender community and transgender actions will bring. So they just kill him. Now, what I hope does not happen, and what I kind of fear is going to happen, is that the extreme right, the nationalist right, if you will take this and try to pass acts of Congress, laws, and all these other bureaucratic laws and processes that will stop free speech and stop the rightful actions of those people who want to debate or want to show the truth. And, like President Trump said, and this concerns me, where he talks about Charlie Kirk and then he starts to go into other things about, how he's basically they're going to use this to bolster, their agenda when it comes to pushing the nationalist agenda. And, he mentioned, judges, law enforcement, ICE agents, and all these other things, how basically if this is allowed, I hope he doesn't go this direction. He's already talked about it, where if you oppose any of those people in any way, that you become basically the shooter of Charlie Kirk, and you're treated like that. And that is extremely dangerous. Now, that does get into the territory of like what happened in 1930s Germany. We don't want another SS police. We don't want another, Gestapos. We don't want that. And we see that happening. And it's interesting because here I am, like, my family's a ranching family. We were attacked by basically federal goons. They claimed that they were law enforcement. They claimed they had, court orders. They had all these things. Yet my dad had been ranching on that ranch. My family had been ranching there since 1877, 100 at the time, 140 years. Now, over 150 years we've been there. And here comes these federal quote-unquote law enforcement, and we oppose them. And now Trump is saying if that happens again, using Charlie Kirk as an excuse, that they're just going to crush you. And I don't want that to happen. I think we should use sense here. I get tired of this extreme left agenda, this agenda that, is so dangerous, and where they basically want to, take everything that anybody else has made and live off of it and ruin it and destroy it, where crime is accepted and everybody should just bow down to them and act like somehow that because they are different and they act different and they want to love each other, when I don't think it's appropriate that we should all just be okay with that. I'm sick of the left agenda, but I'm also probably even more sick of the extreme right nationalist agenda. Because the reason why I say that, where the extreme right nationalist agenda is that, that the courts are where you should battle out your issues, and no matter what they're right, where the police, no matter what they say, no matter what order they give, they're right, where no matter what government does is they're right, that the government gets to take what they want to take for their own benefit, that it's okay to go into other nations and meddle with them and destroy them and all these other things. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with the extreme right nationalist agenda. I think it's terrible. I think it's damaging. I think it's anti-God, just like the left extreme right agenda is anti-God. I think it's anti-God. And, but the thing is the left agenda is dangerous for society because it breaks it down slowly, breaks the family down, breaks everything down. But the extreme right agenda is more dangerous because that's where you have entire, governments and massive law enforcement, and that's where you start to see where because that's where the power is, and then they start to attack and to isolate, to demonize, and then destroy a certain body of people. And it's extremely dangerous. All they got to do is label, like my family and I, just like they tried to do, label us as what? Domestic terrorists, because we've stood for the right to ranch, the right to work. That's all we've done. The right to work and to trade with each other and to use the land and resources as it was meant to be used by the founders, not by some federal takeover, and then you're just dependent on their leasing and they're renting it to you while they make a bunch of money. That's not how the founders established that. And then when you stand up to that, now you're basically a domestic terrorist. You're now a Charlie Kirk shooter on top of a building. That I don't agree with that, and I hate the idea. I hope Trump does not go down that path. I hope Congress does not go down that path. And I mean, it's very strange because the extreme left is completely opposite from what I believe, and the extreme right is completely, I guess opposite as well. But it's extremely dangerous. That's not where we should be. We should be where all people have a right to speak. All people are equal. And that we should be able to have an open debate. And also that law enforcement is not always right. In fact, a lot of times they're not right. I mean, look at what Kash Patel just said about, he giving awards to those who killed Lavoy Finicum. I mean, talk about you got the extreme right killing Lavoy Finicum because he was such a good speaker. And then you got the extreme left killing Charlie Kirk because he was such a good speaker. Anyway, I hope I'm making sense. But they killed Charlie Kirk, justifying that they were stopping a Holocaust. And it's wrong. They're wicked. It's wrong. But it's not right to use this excuse, this action of Charlie Kirk, what do they say? Don't let one good crisis go to waste. Don't let a good crisis go to waste. Well, I hope that we're smarter than that. I hope that President Trump is smarter than that. I hope that, we learn from this, but we do not try to pass a bunch of law, bureaucratic, and try to prop up law enforcement. They're already powerful enough. You already, if they come to arrest you, you can't oppose them, or they kill you, or they charge you, even when they're wrong. I spent 2 years with my family, friends, 2 years in federal prison. 2 years. Half that time was in solitary confinement. I was abused. I was stripped. I was thrown in cells naked. I was in some cases not given food, water. I was held from my family, not once being able to have any contact with them for 2 years. No physical contact with my family for 2 years. And then we found out that the federal government the prosecutors were hiding all this evidence, that they was extremely biased, that the charges were false, and we went through 2 major federal trials and won both of them. But the whole time we were being abused, and that was all being done by law enforcement. We were arrested by law enforcement falsely with no charges. We were put in prison for 2 years. We were abused there. We were prosecuted, lied about, all that by judges, lawyers, U.S. attorneys, and law enforcement. There's many times where they're wrong, flat wrong. And to oppose them is flat right. And to say you can't oppose the government or law enforcement or judges or U.S. attorneys is flat dangerous. Dangerous. It's more dangerous than a man on a building trying to kill someone who's speaking, which is terrible. terrible. But let's not lose ourselves in this. Let's be wise. Let's be wise. Congress, do not go crazy trying to pass some laws that are going to be very dangerous in the future. President Trump, do not go down that path. Please do not go down that path. Our nation does not need this. I leave one example with you. After the Oklahoma City bombing, Congress acted quickly and passed a law that's called the Anti-Terrorism Death Penalty Act of 1996. Now, that law was passed, and then Stephen and Dwight Hammond's ranchers out in literally the middle of almost nowhere, Oregon, they had a back burn on their ranch. They did a prescribed burn. This is a prescribed burn. They jumped the fence and burnt some federally controlled land, Bureau of Land Management controlled land, right? And then later, they did a back burn in order to save their ranch, including possibly the ranch house. And the back burn worked and stopped the fire. These are normal routine ranching things, back burns and prescribed burns. Now, because the prosecutors didn't like them, they wanted to take their land and add it to the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. The prosecutors, U.S. attorneys, used the Anti-Terrorism Death Penalty Act of 1996 to prosecute these ranchers, saying that they lit fire on federal property. It was grass. It was just grass. But they used this. This law was meant to punish terrorists who blew up and used explosives on federal buildings. But because fire was involved, these wicked prosecutors, Frank Papagni was the head prosecutor on these, this wicked U.S. attorney used this against his family and made them suffer for multiple years in prison. They tried to get them, to go back to prison after they had already served their time. And this is what happens. When you pass a law, you cannot button it up enough in order to keep the wicked from using it against good people, against just American ranching workers, whoever they want. And so they're better off not to do this in this case. Do not pass a law. Do not make it where it's more dangerous for the American people to live. So, thank you.